Awake, warriors awake, Juve morning come. Juve, Abaluba yeah, Abaluba yeah, Abaluba yeah, Abaluba. King gang 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 is Juve. King gang 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 is Juve. Spirit rise come to touch the sun. Darkness pass and the morning come. We done pay homage to we ancestors. We done do the ritual for the libation. So we call in the warriors to stand on guard to protect and preserve this tradition. As we fill each heart, every hollow drum with love. Awake, warriors awake, Juve morning come. You rhythm go turn you round. The warriors coming down. Awake, warriors awake, Juve morning come. You rhythm go turn you round. The warriors coming down. King gang 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 is Juve. King gang 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 is Juve. Iron and steel set ablaze to the dawn. No reason to shelter or run from the storm. The drum call anointing every move we make. The rhythm commanding blood and mind to awake. You can't help but answer this clarion call. Not one man must stumble, not one must fall. Unmasking the spirit from one come all with love. Awake, warriors awake, Juve morning come. The rhythm go turn you round. The warriors coming down. Awake, warriors awake, Juve morning come.
Hello and welcome to the Bubb Report. For the first time since the spread of COVID-19 in the Eastern Caribbean, Grenada is experiencing a major community spread event that was due in part to a series of super spreader activities on the island. This recent spike also dovetails with the discovery of the Delta variant by way of an imported case, and acting CMO Son Charles anticipates that the variant is already circulating among the local population and may reach a critical mass.
Of the 19 cases, 4 of them are among locals who have had no travel history. And these cases are being actively investigated.
As a result of this community spread, the Prime Minister announced longer curfew hours, but stopped short of instituting further lockdown measures in order to keep the already struggling Grenadian economy afloat.
Currently, there are 30 active cases, and 20 of those cases have no recent travel history. This is the single most concerning factor, as it confirms local transmission of this dreaded disease. Furthermore, 2 of the positive cases are minors, one as young as 5 years. This in particular breaks my heart. I therefore wish them all speedy recovery. More than 140 persons are currently in isolation, and health officials are continuing the odious tasks of tracing the contacts of the infected and getting them tested. The situation could get worse before it gets better.
We examined the impact and implications of this current COVID spike on the national community. Also, the Grenadian media and the legal community came under scrutiny last week from multiple fronts. On GBN's most recent Beyond the Headlines episode, Senator Chester Humphrey reprimanded the network's manager for what he deemed as broadcast malpractice in the decision to stream expletive-laced Juve Morning content on their social media page. This was the exchange that unfolded.
But to hear the live stream of naked obscenities hurled to the mother of an individual as the general jab jab chant, and to listen that this is being streamed live by a national radio station, I found was a total disgrace. And I just shook my head in total amazement that a radio station, that a broadcast station. In fact, if I was the chairman of the broadcast authority, I would pull your license. If I was the chairman, and then let you come and appeal, because we must have standards.
Later on another network, Senator Humphrey doubled down on his comments and called for the GBN management to be sanctioned.
And I repeat on your radio station that had I been chairman, and I'm not going to leave it there, I am not going to leave it there. Mrs. Campbell cannot disown the GBN Facebook page, which is what she attempted to do in the newscast last night.
Also, Grenadian attorney Jerry Edwin's public conduct came under scrutiny in a now viral video that purports to show Mr. Edwin embroiled in a confrontation while a firearm was seen exposed in the clip.
Up here, officer, you have an old man, 80 years old, who has complained. He doesn't want him here. He doesn't want anybody here. He only wants his niece and his nephew here. You understand?
No, he hasn't.
We examined the state of media regulation in Grenada in the absence of a fully constituted media policy and in the absence of regulations that govern the quick evolution of media in a technological age. We also discussed the lawyer's code of conduct in the wake of Jerry Edwin's video. Finally on our program, we remember the late Sir Eric Gairy, who died on August 23, 1997 in St. George's. We welcome our guests, epidemiologist Jared Sincere, journalists Beverly Sinclair, and former president of the Media Workers Association, Raul Titus. Politician and member of the Grenada United Labour Party, Jeffrey Prudhomme, and attorney Anselm Clouden. We thank you for joining us. A pleasant good morning, good night, good evening, good day, at whatever time you're choosing to view and listen to the Bubb Report. I thank you for joining us for another weekly installment of the program. And of course, before I begin, I want to begin today's program on a personal note. Before moving to the Washington, D.C. area, Brooklyn, New York was and still is my adopted American home. It was where I set up my initial roots and built a foundation for navigating the immigrant journey here in the United States of America. I returned to my beloved Brooklyn last evening, braving storms. As we know, there is a particular storm warning affecting the area at this moment, for a late summer appreciation party that was held in your humble servant's honor. I'm truly grateful to my village aunties Rita Gabriel, Rose and Ambrose, Kathy and Stuart, a near and dear friend of my deceased aunt Carol Williams, a famous tourist vendor in the town of St. George, Frances Purcell, and the entire team of friends and well-wishers who put last night's event together. I thank all of you who braved last night's stormy weather for coming out, including one of my best friends, Leo Edwards, who braved the pandemic conditions to fly from Toronto, Canada for the activity. I'm also thankful to members of the Grenada Ex-Teachers Association of New York, the Presentation College Alumni Association of New York, on whose executive I currently serve, and Brooklyn Borough President Eric Adams for your awards last evening. I will continue to rededicate myself to serving the Grenadian community in whatever way I can. And at this point, I wish to welcome our first guest for our program today, epidemiologist Mr. Jared Sincere. Jared, welcome to the Bubb Report. I understand, as we were setting up for the program, that you're also an ex-PBC student as myself.
Yes, Colin. Good morning, and thank you for having me on your program. You are correct. I'm an old boy of PBC. And it's always good to see fellow students, past students, doing well in their respective fields.
Absolutely. It's such a pleasure to have you here. But we will get down to the seriousness and the gravity of today's discussion. And that has to do with the current COVID spike in Grenada. Now, in our background conversation in leading up to the program today, you did indicate that this would be Grenada's first wave, first COVID wave, that is. Could you tell us the logic behind coming to that conclusion?
Well, the thinking, as we spoke a few days ago, was that we did not have any community spread. So up to last month, we were basically importing cases and doing a pretty good job of isolating and quarantining in those individuals without having a community spread. Now, the scenario we have existed in Grenada is one where we've had some community spread, and once that happens, then there's going to be a ripple effect of the virus being spread from person to person. So that's why I referred to it as our first wave when compared to the experiences we had prior to the one that we're experiencing.
Now, when we talk about waves, we also tend to talk of it within your field. Of course, the nomenclature is that curve, right? So yes, there is a curve that would begin, and then, you would get to the other end of that curve, and the goal is always to flatten that curve. Now, given this current spike in Grenada, with respect to what your thoughts are, the Prime Minister indicated that it may get worse before it gets better. Putting on your epidemiological hat, would you agree with that assertion?
Yes, I would agree for the simple reason, once we have community spread, there's going to be a continuation of it until we get to the point where we sort of suppress or slow down the transmission of the virus. Just let me back up a bit. When we speak about disease transmission, in epidemiology, we have what we call an epi-triad, where we have at the triangle 3 different spots. We have the host, which in this case would be humans. We have the disease-causing agent, and then we have the environment. In order for the pathogen to be transmitted, then the environment must be supporting it in some ways. Now, in some infections, we have what we call a vector, a mosquito or some other insect. In this instance, that doesn't exist. So what public health is attempting to do is to prevent the transmission. So that epi curve that you spoke about is going to continue to rise until we prevent that transmission from person to person, and that will slow down and eventually kill the virus within our population. But the natural progression is that it's going to increase and then start to decrease. So I expect to see, especially with a number of North American individuals returning to Grenada over the last month, we're going to continue to see an increase in cases until that time reaches where we would have done enough contact tracing and being able to stop that continuous spread.
Okay, now you raise a point about returning nationals. Now, the quarantine period for those who are vaccinated is currently 48 hours. And I would be realistic here to say that it is not a full 48 hours. In my experience, having recently traveled to Grenada, what happened was you get the test results back on the following day. Of course, if it's on the weekend, I did not get into Grenada on the weekend. I got into Grenada on a Thursday. And on Friday at 2 p.m., I was out of quarantine. That is not a full 48 hours. Okay. Now, I don't know what happens on weekends. Maybe it's an extended period because of weekend conditions. But are you concerned that the quarantine period, as we see it now, is sufficient or insufficient to be able to capture just proper documentation of results?
That's a very good question, Kellon, and I think herein lies one of the challenges that we have, because according to the science, the virus COVID-19 can be transmitted anywhere between 24 to 48 hours after you've been infected with it. If you were to quarantine someone for 48 hours, which is 2 days, you may or may not catch that period that the person is infected or infectious, can transmit the disease. Because these numbers that we use are just averages. It varies for individuals. So when we have a 24 to 48 period, it doesn't necessarily mean that the upper limit of 48 hours is where it cuts off automatically for each person. It may go beyond that point. So herein lies the thin line where science is unable to tell us, because of the different, everyone is different, that this is going to be the period when an individual can be infectious. It varies for individuals. So that's why we give a range. For some individuals, it's going to be less. For some individuals, it's going to be more. So I think 48 hours is too short. But I also understand the resources that we have and the pressure it puts on the health system to monitor that. So herein lies the challenges that Grenada has now. How do we continue to put individuals under quarantine for, let's say, 2 days and be able to sustain that as individuals continue to come in? So that's one of the major challenges that we have.
So what would you recommend as a proper sort of quarantine period? Would you say 7 days for whether you're vaccinated or not?
I would say anywhere from 3 to 5 days is a safe period for vaccinated individuals. And it's just off my head. I just think the 2 days, 48 hours is a bit too close to what we know of the science of transmission of this infectious agent. And but I also understand why the country is trying to have that decreased burden on the health system, having to monitor and to have individuals do the contact tracing when necessary. And so it's too close. I would say 3 to 5 days sounds as a safer period for me, so that we can at least say that we are we are keeping individuals quarantined outside of what is recommended, which makes it a lot safer for us.
Now, of course, public health officials in Grenada are mounting an aggressive contact tracing activity at this moment. We do have, as they confirmed, we do have the Delta variant, which, as we know, is a much more virulent strain of COVID-19. It is also, in terms of the infection, it is also much more potent as we understand it. How concerned are you about that particular Delta variant being on island? I mean, so far we have dodged the proverbial bullet with respect to deaths, with respect to infections and recoveries. So how concerned are you with this current Delta variant on island?
Kellon, allow me to read an excerpt from an article written on the Yale Medicine, and that's going to give you a bit of my position.
Okay.
The Center for Disease Control and Prevention, that's CDC, described Delta as more transmissible than the common cold and influenza, as well as the viruses that cause smallpox, MERS, SARS, and Ebola, and called it as contagious as chickenpox in an internal document. The highest spread of cases and severe outcomes is happening in places with low vaccination rates, and virtually all hospitalizations and deaths have been among the unvaccinated. Now, this is what CDC is saying about the Delta variant of COVID-19. Just let me emphasize, it is more transmissible than the common cold, and we know how transmissible it is. Influenza, and the viruses that cause smallpox, MERS, SARS, and Ebola. So I don't think we understand the seriousness of the Delta variant being within our population. It is a serious situation, and we must take every effort aggressively to stop the spread of it, because we have, I think, up to the Prime Minister's address, we have about 18 to 20,000 individuals vaccinated. That's about 1/5 of our population. So 4/5 of our population are currently unvaccinated, that is unprotected. And when I say unprotected, we know that vaccination does not guarantee immunity from infection, but it sort of reduces the symptoms or the severity of the effect that it may have on you. And so there is a cause for concern. Now, the COVID-19 virus, there's the 3 C's that we think about in terms of how it spread. Closed spaces, so if you have closed areas, crowded places, and close contact settings. There's the 3 C's that contribute, or pillars for transmission. And if you notice, the Prime Minister spoke about one. He instituted or increased our time that we should be in, right? The curfew from 9 p.m. to 5 a.m. Now, this automatically is going to reduce the crowded groups at nights, etc. But beyond that, Kellon, I see individuals walking the streets of Grenada without a mask. I see individuals going on their daily routines without wearing a mask. And we all know that's one of the suggested practices that we can employ individually that can help prevent the transmission of the virus. And so I don't think that the Grenadian population understands the seriousness of those little things that we can do, because we have the most deadly strain within our community, as according to the records at this point.
Now, and mask wearing is critical. Yes, it is extremely critical. And I would say this, that public health officials should also lead by example. If the Minister of Health is admonishing Grenadians every week to wear the mask and to social distance, we expect that the Minister of Health would be wearing his mask. As we saw last week, we don't know when that, first of all, we know that photo is contemporaneous because it was taken with a famous actor who is on island in the person of Steven Seagal. The Minister of Health was not wearing his mask. And I believe charity begins at home, and we should be able to lead by example as well. But yes, to your concern about the mask wearing, I mean, in Grenada, folks don't necessarily wear the mask except if they go into public buildings.
And the interesting thing about it, I heard one of the representatives from the Royal Grenada Police Force share on one of the media houses that wearing a mask is instituted by law, and individuals are required to wear a mask. And I wasn't aware that that was instituted into our law, but I was happy that he said it. But I do not hear, I think that whilst the drive to increase the uptake of vaccinations in Grenada is one of our focal points, I think that we are failing in other aspects, because historically, Kellon, new vaccinations has always been met with some rejection. There has always been low uptake of vaccinations, especially when individuals think that there is a risk. So really it's a lack of trust because individuals think that there is a risk involved with taking the vaccination. So the public health officials should know that because the science tells us that whenever we have new vaccinations, there's going to be low uptake, there's going to be resistance to it. So my question is, whilst we champion the individuals getting vaccinated, fully vaccinated, we must also focus on the other protocols that we must follow that can prevent the spread of the virus. Because we know that everyone, in fact, a larger percentage would not take the vaccine. The science tells us that. So because we cannot force it on individuals, that's a personal decision. And once individuals assess risk, and that may be misinformation, that may be incorrect information, that may be personal beliefs, that may be spiritual beliefs, that may be cultural beliefs. And all those forces come into play that would tend to influence an individual, whether he or she takes the vaccine. And so I seem to think that the drive for vaccination has not considered those things that are very important to individuals, because a decision like that is not just taken to prevent the outcome. The fact is we've not had any COVID deaths. I think it's one related COVID deaths. And so,
which was related to an imported case.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So,
not an endemic case.
Grenadians go about their daily lives thinking that, well, we've seen it happening in bigger countries, but it does not happen here. So why take a vaccine that we are not too sure in terms of risk, what are the long-term effects it may have on us, when we have not seen the effects of COVID in terms of mortality and that extreme experiences. And so I believe that the Ministry of Health and the government is failing to address that aspect, so that we focus on, in addition to the uptake of vaccine, we focus on the protocols, constant sounding of the protocols, constant enforcing of wearing masks and monitoring of it, of sanitizing hands, etc. Constant breaking up of crowds and those things, because that is what is going to support the vaccination. So it's not just a one aspect, because, as I said, the science shows that once individuals assess that there's a high risk for a vaccine, there would be resistance to it. And as it stands now, that is what is happening. The individuals are not comfortable taking it. And that's the resistance.
Yeah, and there is increased vaccine hesitancy in the Caribbean. Now, what would you recommend if you were in the seat of the decision makers in St. George's, what would you recommend as a proper strategy for sort of increasing the vaccination rates on island?
I would definitely desist from forcing individuals seemingly, and focus on removing the barriers that may exist.
But when you say force, that is not a blanket forcing.
No, it's not. But it comes. You see, when it's not direct forcing, but you can nudge individuals in that direction, even if they don't want to. Let's say, for example, right? If I'm working in an institution that says it's mandatory for me to get vaccinated in order for me to continue working. So I may have to sit and assess, how does that affect me economically? I may have a mortgage, I may have to pay for my car, I may have piece of land, I may have student loan, I may have kids in college, and I may have to say, well, based on that, I'll have to take it, but I don't want to take it. So that is in itself influencing the decision, because based on the position I'm in economically, I have to take it. And that in itself is not ethical. But I would not want to discuss that further. The whole aspect of me sitting there and looking on what should be done, I would say I have not seen or heard the powers that be in Grenada conduct surveys get information from the people to determine what is it that is contributing to the hesitancy, and how can we remove those barriers. These things can be done. I'm saying that if we get that information from the population, then we can come up with strategies to remove those barriers, so that the hesitancy is removed or decreased. And
I don't mean to interject. I'm smiling here because I am now wearing my health communication hat. I am a health communication scholar. For those who don't know, that is what I do, and research is so important and critical. Essentially trying to understand what causes the hesitancy, and really trying to message the population should not only involve public forums, it should not only involve television programs, it also has to involve going out into the community, conducting that research, doing focus groups, to your point about understanding the source of the hesitancy, and then tailoring your message to fit within that particular rubric. But I digress. Please proceed.
Well, that's what I'm saying. So that's the approach I would take. I would continue to champion the vaccinations, but in addition to that, I would focus on gathering information. I would focus on sensitizing, on increasing my efforts to reminding individuals of the importance of following the protocols like the mask, sanitization, hand sanitization, etc. And those things. And I would take that approach that encompasses everyone rather than using one strategy, rather than just complaining, because to me it's glaring. At this point, you only have 18,000 individuals vaccinated. It sends a message. It sends a message to us. And a lot of individuals felt that they were nudged into taking it.
Okay, so Mr. Sensei, we will get to some viewer and listener comments. Kay Perez is saying absolutely too short quarantine for this more transmissible variant. Jennifer Gibbs, I agree, mandatory mask wearing, and that should be mandatory mask wearing for everyone. And if you break the law, you're expected to be sanctioned accordingly, and that should include everyone. Bob Marichal is saying epidemiologists are public officials who investigate the patterns and causes of the virus, and that is a quote. What pattern is emerging in Grenada and the cause of such patterns? Do you mind sharing your expertise on this?
Based on, we do not have any evidence. Because research has not been done. What has been done, according to my knowledge, is basically descriptive statistics, looking at who are infected, where the infections, so person, place, and time. But that is not enough, because we have not done any research, I would say, to that level, because we have not had the community spread. It was all imported cases, and we were dealing with it pretty good up to last month, I would say. So we do not have evidence to speak to that question as much as we would like to. Now that we're having community spread, we understand that functions, and as I mentioned, closed environments, overcrowding, and because the virus can be spread easily once we have communication. So if we have shows where people are singing and talking and enjoying themselves, droplets, can spread quite easily and quickly. And as I just read, the Delta variant is much more transmissible than, the common cold influenza, imagine, and we know how easily those things spread. So that is a cause for concern, and as I said, Kellon, the powers be must start conducting those studies. In other words, of the practice of public health. We know, I teach, that public health is influenced by evidence. So it's evidence-based practice, medicine as well, evidence-based practice. If our practice is influenced by the evidence we get from the populations and the communities, then we'll be more successful.
All right, let's get to some other viewer and listener comments. Kimberly Phillip is saying, and the curfew changes increases the amount of time spent indoors. I suspect that goes to just reducing contact among the general population.
Yes.
Yep.
Because as I said, Kellum, before you read the other comment, in the epi triad, you see, we have it's very simple to understand. If an infectious person does not come in contact with a susceptible person, the virus cannot be transmitted.
Yeah.
So if we limit that, then we sort of kill the virus, because for it to survive, it must continue to spread within our communities. So the coffee would limit that to a certain
would
extent.
limit that. And would you say, and this is one aspect of the COVID containment that I still struggle to understand. Curfew times. So they changed it from 12 a.m. Now it's back to 9 p.m. To 5 a.m. Ralph Gonzalez famously made a comment around is COVID-19 Nicodemus. Again, could you just reinforce the science behind curfews?
The science behind it. One, people tend to gather in crowds for entertainment purposes. At nights, the virus is spread easily in cooler conditions. When it's hotter, it is less likely to spread. It's more difficult to get infected. It doesn't say it doesn't happen, but with increased temperatures, then the transmissibility goes down. So having that control at nights, which basically improves the transmissibility based on the environmental conditions. Remember I said we have the environment, the host, and the agent. So if we can, at different points, at the host, we can use masks, immunizations, and the hand sanitization. The environment, so that's things in the environment that we tend to want to control. So temperature, humidity, and those things affect transmissibility of the virus. And so limiting gatherings at nights, which tend to support easier transmission, because the virus can survive longer periods, is one of the areas and that's hence the reason, that's the science behind it. When it's warmer, it's a little bit more difficult. So the virus survives at shorter times when it's outside of the body, when it's warmer. And that's the science behind it.
And maybe that's working to our advantage in at least Grenada in terms of weather, perhaps, right?
Well,
okay,
yeah.
So let's get to another comment. Donna Swap is saying it's not that people do not, quote, understand, unquote, the seriousness of this pandemic, but that they do not, quote, trust the information being presented to them. For them, it's, quote, fake news, unquote. Of course, this is not to take away from the persons who, in parentheses, with or without self-directed learning of this virus, close parentheses, are scared to death of dying from this virus or having a horrible reaction, including death to the vaccine. That is a very deep comment there. I want you to unpack that, please.
Yeah, and thank you, Donna, I know Donna very well. We grew up in very close communities, actually.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's a very strong comment, and it makes a lot of sense. And as I did said earlier on, whilst people may have an aware of the seriousness, it has not hit home. As I said, I don't think the seriousness of the effects of COVID-19 infection, it has not hit home to us in Grenada, because, as I said, we only had one death related to COVID-19. We have not seen what we've seen on television in Italy and Spain and those countries. So I believe that that is one of the reasons. And second, to her point, when information that has been fed to us has not been totally accurate, because initially, everyone felt that the vaccine was going to provide total immunity.
But that was never that was
the thought before, but they soon found out that it only reduced the symptoms if you got infected. And that's the thing with science, because see, as a science student myself, I do understand the gray line that exists when you are working on those things. And whilst another individual may think, well, science lies, it doesn't. We basically would give you evidence and reasons based on what we know at a particular time. And when that changes, then we have to change with it. So it speaks the truth, but it looks as if it's changing with time, and people tend to lose trust in that, because there isn't that consistency at times, and especially when we're trying to develop some new things. So I'm not really defending science, but I'm saying this is what it is. And so if a normal person who doesn't understand that would, of course, interpret that as not having accurate information. And at sometimes I believe that the individuals who are responsible for sharing information to the population does not do a good enough job to educate us, not just about pros, but cons as well. Because I believe that we are supposed to make informed decisions, especially when it comes to something like getting vaccinated. So just giving reasons, supporting, why we may be vaccinated, I don't think is enough, because individuals would respect honesty. So of course there are side effects. I'm fully vaccinated, and my second shot, I had a rough time with it. But I understood the risk that I was putting myself at to get vaccinated. And so, that I believe there is a lack of trust, as Donna correctly said, because individuals feel that they have not been given accurate information in the past.
But you're talking about lack of trust. I think that is also mitigated by the amount of misinformation, disinformation that we have, and people also trust those sources of information. So how then do you battle that particular challenge? Because people will send me, they send edited clips. It would be a 30-second clip with an expert from some, without any context, but that informs also their decision process. So how do we overcome that particular challenge?
I always say, Kellon, we've become a population with more degrees, but we have not improved in terms of our education. And when I say education as citizens, what does it mean to be a Grenadian? What are my rights? Do I understand what the Constitution is? How does this affect my health or my future? So we've become largely on social media people, and we react to things on social media. We place a lot of priority on everything that is posted and shared. We seem to take it as a gospel truth, and without doing any reading or investigations for ourselves. So the underlying reason is that we do not have well-educated, not formal schooling people. And I must make a distinction, well-educated individuals. And education, as I'm going to re-emphasize, it's not here referring to formal schooling, because we do know what the limitations are with formal schooling. And certain systems or methods of teaching individuals. So I'm saying the fundamental deficiency that we have here is that we do not. Have you ever read the book, The Miseducation of the Negro?
I have, yes.
Right. So largely we have been miseducated. Largely we have been miseducated. And it is our responsibility now to re-educate ourselves. Not with degrees, not just with degrees, because they do have their function and their importance. But as an individual, we must re-educate ourselves to start thinking differently, to empower ourselves and not just depend. We've largely become social media individuals, reactive to social media. And that's how shallow we are now. And it's sad to say, that's my contribution, education. We do not have well-educated individuals in Grenada. And again, not formal schooling.
Not formal schooling. Yes, let's get to some other comments. Cassandra Mitchell is saying there is confusion about the differences between the laws and regulations, even among members of the RGPF. I think that would, Cassandra, you jumping the gun. You'll get to the next segment shortly, and we have those folks lined up. Let's get to some other comments. Jennifer Gibbs saying, I think the government has done their best with respect to just the management of this particular COVID crisis. Up to this point, I think Grenada has done well.
I believe we've done a good job too. I believe they've done, considering the limitations with resources, I think, to hold out up to this point, because it was always going to happen. It was always going to happen that we have a community spread eventually. So I think they've done a good job. And the challenge now is just to make sure that we sort of limit the spread within our population.
Kipling Francis is saying the ministers are setting bad examples while blaming others for their failure to practice to practice what they preach. But that's Grenada. Margaret Francis is making an interesting comment here. She says, employ a carrot rather than a stick approach if you want people to take the vaccine. Dane Andrews saying, while protocols are necessary to prevent the spread, and a fully vaccinated nation would be awesome. In your opinion, as an epidemiologist, do you think that the government could do a much better job taking into consideration that they have to manage just about 110,000 people in comparison to New Zealand and Taiwan, who did a splendid job with their COVID strategies?
That's a very good question, and I would say that we operate under different economic conditions in an environment, especially in Grenada. And I could go. I'm not an economist by any means, but if you look at what we've been depending on, our mainstay has been the tourism industry, and we've actually placed ourselves in a in a predicament with that, because that has pretty much has gotten the hardest hit during this pandemic. So yes, I would say a better job could be done with managing the 110 individuals, but there are competing forces relating to economic activity, and I don't think that Grenada would do very well if we go on a total lockdown again, because already we're struggling. It's very difficult, and so now the efforts, I would say, is the challenge the government has now is balancing keeping economic activity with managing the spread of COVID-19. We just would be a very serious hit to our economy if we go on a lockdown again. So I do understand what that person is saying, and maybe different strategies, maybe looking, as I said, looking at the reasons why we have such a low uptake and why the hesitancy for vaccine acceptance has been so high as well, and looking at those strategies to manage it better. But I think we're really between a rock and a hard place in terms of balancing the economic activity to ensure that our economy doesn't really fall all the way down, that it makes it almost impossible to bounce back. It's already kind of a challenge in living in Grenada with the cost of living. So these are all issues I know the government must be considering. I'm by no means an economist, but I just feel that that's what they're trying to do, manage economic activity with controlling the spread of COVID-19. So having a lockdown and using extreme strategies now would not benefit us, and it still would allow us to continue with a susceptible population. Whilst we do not want COVID-19 to come and reap havoc here, Kellon, it would be better if we manage the wave and the spread within our population, rather than having an entirely susceptible population, because 2 years down the road is going to happen anyways. So it would be better to manage the spread now and develop some levels of immunity over time, rather than having a totally susceptible population. So that is balancing that aspect, because the longer we sort of keep out COVID, the more likely we're in for an outbreak. So we do not want it to come in, but when it comes in, we want to manage it in a way that it doesn't reap havoc and put our health systems onto too much burden that makes it impossible for us to function. But at the same time, we understand from an epidemiological perspective that the balance between susceptible and immunity is what creates or prevents outbreaks. When we have more immune individuals, then the likelihood of an outbreak decreases. When we have more susceptible individuals, then the likelihood of an outbreak increases. Currently, we have more susceptible individuals, so we have, the likelihood of outbreaks is very high here. With time, if COVID continues to spread and managed properly, then we have less susceptible individuals, and so outbreaks would die and go down, die a natural death eventually.
And let's get to some comments. Thank you for staying over time. I really appreciate the time you're taking.
That's nothing.
But that is supposed to be the PBC way. You're a past student of PBC, so we are a team now.
We are a team, yes, Kellon. I'm happy to be on your program.
Yes.
And anytime you wish for me to return to discuss, things pertaining to Grenada, I'll be happy to
Absolutely. And we will quickly get to some comments because we have to get to the next segment quickly. Leo Edwards is saying, I think we are still figuring out this virus. After all, it's still novel. I think all the flip-flopping and mixed messages globally is not helping compliance. I also think we had to go down this mandatory vaccine route as is done in North America. We must consider our lived experience with vaccine and health. And that is a critical point, especially as people of color. As attending Howard University, I was able to see what racialized medicine did to people of color, and that's not only the Tuskegee experiment. That goes back to the deeply entrenched way that modern Western medicine was set up. And I'm not going to go off on a tangent. I'm not in my class, but
I know where you're going.
Yeah, let's get to some other comments. Viewers and listeners, thank you so much. This is such an important discussion. Melissa Gabriel is saying, I think we could also have done more in sensitizing people. That would have helped more people and persons. Let me try not to. Persons in making an informed decision. Bob Marichaux, now is the time to train health wardens to take it to the people in every nook and cranny of Grenada, Carriacou, and Petite Martinique. So before enforcement comes education. Yeah. Sarah Mack is saying, so true. I'm witnessing Barbados do a series of town hall meetings in parishes. And of course, granted, Sharon, we also have to give the government of Grenada credit because they also have a series of public education campaigns, but to what extent that goes far enough in really sensitizing the population?
More can be done. Yes,
more can be done is what the suggestion is. Let's see here. John Crow is saying too much confusion with the information sharing. Agreeing with Cassandra, difference between regulation and law. Yes, Kellen, beating the pavement is necessary, not blind enforcement. Brian Grimes, why do we pretend that making a man choose his job versus taking a vaccine as not being forced? This is so intellectually disingenuous. It's like losing your job is a casual decision. It's an interesting take there. Yes. You wanna respond to any of those comments quickly?
I think we've touched on it. Most of them. I spoke about the nudging or influencing individuals to take vaccines because of economic situations with respect to their jobs. And I believe I agree with most of the comments. We did touch on education, we touched on research, having the evidence to inform our practice. And I believe, most of the comments here, I agree totally with them. It's although it's a novel experience, I believe we have the personnel, we have the brains, we have the individuals here who we can engage, who we can come on board I believe St. George's University could play a more active role in this whole COVID strategy on how we prevent it and control the spread, the information we get out. There's a public health department. In fact, I work in the public health department in St. George's University. So, I just believe in bringing in more individuals rather than having the burden placed on the ministry can serve, good for all of us.
Absolutely. And we will take a break and we will come back to you for some final comments because what we want to do is to really, I guess it might be difficult to forecast what the next few weeks might look like in Grenada, but at the same time, we do have contemporary knowledge to go with. And when I say contemporary knowledge, I'm speaking specifically of what is happening in other Caribbean islands. So we would come back for a wrap up. Viewers and listeners, stand by. We will be right back.
So it's not a legal schooling. I know you're sensitive to people schooling you on the law, but I think I can trump you when it comes to the history of Grenada.
What you're saying is that this resignation was expected? Would it be fair to say that you abdicated your responsibility by not showing up in Parliament on Friday?
We are not aware of the terms of the agreement.
But then how can you say the terms are not favorable? You don't know the terms.
We love old talk, we love gossip, we love brango, we love all them kind of things in the Caribbean.
If I cannot play music, I don't know how I'm going to live.
We are borrowing money to pay debt because of corruption, waste, and mismanagement.
That they have difficulty with your leadership. why then are you contesting the presidency? You've said. And welcome back, folks. If you're just joining us, I'm here with Jared Sincere, who is an epidemiologist. He's attached to the St. George's University in Grenada. And we thank him for being on our program today to really dig deeper. This is a deeper dive into the current COVID spike in Grenada. Would you say at this point that we have community spread, sir?
Yes, we have. The descriptive statistics done has shown that we were able to, the ministry were able to look at the imported cases and determine that we had individuals who tested positive who did not travel, etc., or return to Grenada. So yes, we have evidence that there has been community spread.
The government is not framing it as community spread, however. Do you think this is a matter of semantics, or?
It is. It is. One of the public health has to share its information in a way that it doesn't create panic. Has to be honest, should be honest, but doesn't create panic and chaos. And so community spread tend to suggest that it's all over and it's spreading as wildfire, just the phrase. But we do have some form of spread that has been occurring, and they continue to do contact tracing to ensure that it doesn't continue. The Delta variant, as I said, is highly transmissible. And that's the concern, in that we would need to capture as much individuals, when I say capture, identify them and put them on quarantine by households, so that it doesn't get outside of households and individuals. And that's what I alluded to earlier on. That's public health in action. Putting barriers to prevent the spread of the disease-causing agent from someone who is infectious to a susceptible individual. And that's what the quarantine does. That's what the contract tracing objective is, to identify individuals who have been possibly exposed to individuals who are infectious, and then containing that so that it doesn't spread further. And again, it's just controlling the environment and the infectious agent getting outside of the environment to a susceptible individual. So yes, I expect to see, if the contact tracing is not 100% effective by finding all individuals, then we're going to continue to see a rise in cases. Because every time we miss someone, that person becomes infectious and then infects another person, or 2 or 3 persons. And that 2 or 3 persons, if we don't find them, becomes infectious, infects that 2 or 3 persons, infects 2 or 3 persons again. And that's the ripple effect it's going to have if we do not have 100% successful contact tracing of individuals who were exposed to the agent. And that's what makes it so dangerous, because the ease with which it's spread, each person that's infectious can easily spread it to 2 or 3 individuals. That's what the science shows. So every time we have an infectious person, we multiply that by 2 or 3, and that's second tertiary, secondary cases, or we would call them, based on the chain of infection. And that is multiplied over and over. And so the effectiveness of our contact tracing is what's going to determine what we see happening over the next few weeks as it relates to increase or tapering off of the cases, as we've been experiencing over the last 2 or 3 weeks. Also, the St. George's University has reopened, and we all know that we travel to campus every day. We teach, and then we return to our families or friends. We meet other individuals, and I would say wearing a mask also is very important, because obviously individuals returning to campus from COVID-19 areas, there may 1 or 2 may slip through the cracks. It happens. It's just a nature. We are unable. There's no way a test captures everything. There's no way there isn't a 100% accurate test. There are individuals who are asymptomatic. So that's what we're dealing with. So there are a number of areas that we need to focus on. Wearing your mask is key. effective contact tracing is also key, and just being sensitive to what's happening in our communities and within our population.
And finally, forecasting the future here in terms of what might unfold in Grenada. We seem to have a template in St. Lucia. We have a template in Trinidad and Tobago. In the Trinidad, we also have in the French Caribbean islands, Martinique and Guadeloupe. In Jamaica, the Prime Minister recently telegraphed that the health system is on the verge of collapse. I mean, this is serious existential stuff for public health in the region. What advice would you give to the government of Grenada if you were the Minister of Health at this moment? How would you really anticipate managing what might become, hopefully it does not become a public health crisis at the expense of sounding alarmist, as the minister chastised the media in Grenada for being alarmist and blaming them for, we will get to that shortly, but please proceed, sir, please proceed.
I would say, I would encourage the minister to continue making every effort, because what we're doing, I think we're doing a pretty good job with the contact tracing, monitoring individuals who are coming in, etc. But I believe that we need to do some more with the quarantine. 2 days is definitely not enough in my estimation. I think it's too close to the window that we speak about. So I would like for him to consider increasing the quarantine from 2 days to 3 to 5 days, just to ensure that we're a little bit safer. I would also want to see a little bit more aggressive actions to enforce wearing of masks, so making it mandatory, and not because it's written already. We have it as something that we should be doing, we must be doing, but I don't think the ordinary person on the street understands that a police officer can come up to you and actually ask you, and may charge you as well for not wearing your mask. So I would want to say that those things need to be done. But in addition to that, Kellon, we cannot be short-sighted and assume that we would not get to the point, or we may not get to the point where the health system gets overburdened. So I would say forward thinking. We must look at what has happened to the other islands. Based on the epidemiological profile, it happens to almost all countries where we have extreme cases that have extreme death-threatening conditions when infected. So it's in the horizon for us. I'm not predicting doom, but I'm saying we can look at what has happened to other countries. It may be on a smaller scale here, but we must think about what percentage of cases we could look at the science, approach that actual experience and make provision in terms of resources, personnel, ensure that we have the capacity to deal with that. Because based on the science, we say epidemiological is the science of public health, right? And the science tells us we should not assume that it wouldn't happen. Neither should we say it's going to happen, but we must prepare for it in the event that it happens. And that's what that's what I could advise the minister. We must ensure that we are prepared for a percentage of individuals who've been infected with the Delta variant to have extreme life-threatening conditions, and we must have the resources available to ensure that we do not experience high mortality rates in those individuals.
And what about testing? The cost of testing in Grenada is prohibitively high, in my view, when compared to other islands in the OECS and CARICOM jurisdiction. Would you recommend sort of a massive testing of the population at this point that would be covered by the state, perhaps, to ensure that we have better surveillance?
It's not sustainable to do that. Just because the resources we have is limited, it's not sustainable. I would say, Kellon, strengthen what we're doing. Make sure that we are getting better at it, looking at how we're doing it, doing evaluations of it to ensure that the contact tracing improves, to ensure that our quarantine becomes more effective, to ensure that we verify that individuals who come in are really vaccinated. The question is, are the vaccination cards produced? Are they authentic? That's a real question we have to ask as well. So these are real questions. These are things that we need. I think we could strengthen. Having mass testing, I think that's not sustainable at all. And we can strengthen what we're doing, get better at it, and hope that the best, we experience the best and not the worst. But be prepared just in case, we have extreme situations here. But I believe that we're going to have, it's just a matter of time. We're going to have. There are many things that could contribute to that. Someone's health status, how well your immune system is functioning, how healthy you are. Do you have other health outcomes that may cause, comorbidities, so, there are many things that we cannot control based on the individual, but we can prepare for it because there may be an individual within our population who gets infected and whose immune system just are not able to respond in ways and may end up an extreme case. So we shouldn't think that it's not going to happen because we've seen it happen in all the countries. We've seen it happening. We have a smaller population, which means that we're going to have less of it because usually we can have an idea based on percentages. So I would advise the minister to prepare for it rather than, interpreting it as being a prophet of doom. I don't think it's,
All right, Jared Sensei, thank you so much for appearing on the report. I believe you were able to provide really some proper contextual information, and the viewers and listeners were very impressed with how you were able to explain and really crystallize the context of our current COVID situation. So thank you again. And we went over time, but I thought that it was necessary to have this discussion.
Yes, Kellon, and thank you for having me. It was a pleasure, and I just want to say you're doing a good job. So continue doing that. It makes a big difference having this informed programs, bringing professionals, bringing individuals on where we can have these healthy discussions. And I want to thank all the viewers who made contributions through your comments. Continue contributing because I think this is what gives that rich experience when we have those discussions, having individuals give their input. So I want to thank everyone, and Kellon, continue doing a good job.
Absolutely, in the PBC way, if you will.
I don't want to be too biased,
Well, I mean, I have a bias when it comes to my high school.
We all have it, but
yes, high school spirit is cultural, I
always say that whilst I went to PBC and PBC is at my heart, I've also our major rival GBSS. I mean, I've had some really good friends from there as well.
Don't go there.
I remember, okay. Kellon, just before we caught up, I remember
yes.
the basketball game we played on PBC court. GBSS came up there and beat us, man. I lied down on the court and cried,
On the PBC court? Now that is sacrilege. Sacrilege.
They came to our backyard and whooped us. And I just stayed on the court and cried after the game. I couldn't deal with that one.
You should not have said that on air. We have to keep those things in the
I've long since moved on from that, so
Okay, all right. Again, Mr. Sensei, thank you so much. Please share this conversation, folks, so that other folks can hear it. I thought this was a very, very important and substantive and balanced discussion that we had with Mr. Jared Sensei this morning. So thank you again, Mr. Sensei. Viewers and listeners, stand by. We will be right back.
recent cases, do you have any concern in relation to any one of those cases being at some of the recent gatherings, be it the Juve-like activities, the celebrations involved with the Olympic celebrations?
Any of the activities that we begged the population not to have? So let me repeat that again. You are asking us if we have concerns that any of the positive cases attended some of the activities that we pleaded and begged the population not to have. I think that gives you your answer. We pleaded and begged the population not to have these activities. Now you come and ask if we are concerned. Yes, we are concerned. That's why we pleaded and begged not to have these activities. That's why we said there should be no carnival this year. That's why we are critical of some radio stations. And if it is your radio station, then you need to recognize it. That promoted some of these activities. That encouraged people to attend these activities instead of discouraging. Some DJs I did hear, and some hosts discourage people, but I did hear many encourage people to attend. And now you ask if we are concerned. Yes, we are concerned. What we wish is that you were concerned as we are now back then, when we said, do not have these activities, please. And there's some members of the population saying, why didn't the police stop and why didn't? No. These are Grenadians going out for themselves and deciding to be defiant, falsely using culture. Shame.
And welcome back, folks. That was Grenada's Minister of Health essentially dressing down Blossom, Alexis Welch, at the recent post-cabinet press briefing. Of course, for this segment, we are joined by Beverly Sinclair, journalist, Raul Titus, who's the former president of the Media Workers Association, and we are attempting to also have Anselm Clouden, but we're having some difficulties in connecting with him online. But Beverly and Raul, I want you to first react to that first segment that we had with Mr. Sinclair, and just to get your thoughts with wearing your journalistic hat, wearing your information hat on the information that you heard here this morning.
Okay, well, I was very proud. Good morning, guys. Good morning, everyone.
Yes.
I was very proud of Gerald. We went to PBC together as usual.
Oh boy!
As usual, so just want to quickly bring up that story. Anyhow,
yes,
he was very good, very good, very informative, very knowledgeable, and he said quite a number of good things. One of the last points he was making just before he segued off, the issue of, I think you asked him about advising the minister, and he talked about preparation. I think that's what the substance of his point. Preparing, because to be honest, you have to give the government some credit. Earlier on, well, they were a bit laissez-faire when the pandemic just started, but they pick up their marbles a bit, and they were trying their best to do things and managing it and so on. So give them that credit. But I think to some extent, there are some slacking off a bit, because you have to adjust. You know, Carnival, well, you don't have Carnival, you've cancelled Carnival, but you know it's the summertime. A lot of Grenadians will return. And so on. People will have parties. You'll have an idea. People will have parties. So you have to sort of adjust, step up, and make sure that regulations are enforced. You have to make sure that the protocols are enforced. You have to step up. You can't be laissez-faire on those things. And yes, I'm saying people have a personal responsibility too. So we're not making any excuse on people's choice of having personal responsibility, but the state and the policymakers and the lawmakers have an obligation to ensure that they're vigilant, they remain vigilant in ensuring it cannot be a situation where it's one for this section of the society and another for this section, because to some extent, and that is what a lot of people were annoyed about when they were protesting. People got the perception that in a way what COVID is doing, it's magnifying the social stratification in society. So I'm selling my barbecue to send my children to school. I'm doing my hustle on the side, and I have to shut down. But parties are going on in Lansapina and True Blue. So if people feel that way, they'll feel that, okay, this is not fair, this is not justice. So you have to adjust. And with carnival time, I say carnival time because carnival was cancelled. This particular period, Grenadians returning, they're using all sorts of tricks, getting all sorts of fake documents. That has been happening. And they're coming in and having all these parties. You have to crack down on it. You cannot cop out and say personal responsibility. Yes, personal responsibility, but you have to adjust your speed, adjust your response to this, and deal with it. So that point that Gerald make about preparing for the change, preparing for a new period, a new era, preparing for the summer, that was a valid point.
Beverly?
Well, good morning to you, Kellon and Rawl, and all your listeners and viewers everywhere. This whole COVID-19 control of the virus thing, it's really very complex, Kellon. And I believe the authorities are looking for simple solutions to a very complex issue. In Grenada in particular, I can say there has been demonstrated disrespect for the people and also demonstrated that the authorities just want to be in control. So it's control and disrespect that has been at the core of the government's campaign for vaccination, for adherence to the rules, and people will kick back and resist that kind of coming at them in that way. I am not in any way justifying any type of behavior that leads to producing some kind of risk for people to get infected. So let me make that very clear. I am not in support of any type of behavior that puts people at risk.
At the expense of being chastised by the Minister of Health, but please proceed.
Oh, the minister would dare not speak to me like that. He'd be out of his place, Kellon, to try and speak with me like that.
Yes, stick a pin, we'll get there, but please proceed. We'll get to that part, but please proceed,
right.
Yes.
Yes, so so people have a personal responsibility, as Rawl had said just a few minutes ago. But within that personal responsibility, you have to have laws, you have to have rules, you have to have regulations. You must have a framework within which people operate. It can't be free for all. And Grenada has done well when the virus is not there. But once it's on the island, you notice a different kind of response and a different kind of activity. So while we say we compliment the government for doing what it has done to keep the numbers low, then on the other side, every time the numbers go up, we blame the residents, we blame citizens, we blame the people. So if the government is taking responsibility for keeping the numbers low, shouldn't they also take responsibility for when the numbers begin to rise and stop blaming people? So personal responsibility goes both ways, Kellon. It's not just for the people. As a matter of fact, those who are elected to serve and elected to govern have a greater responsibility to make sure that they take their responsibilities to the point where they engage and have persons become part of the whole campaign and not have a campaign that people are obviously kicking against and not in conformity at all. So those are my thoughts. But I thought the discussion this morning was quite engaging, I would say. A lot of information was put out there that I hope people will pay attention to. And at the same time, take responsibility for your personal actions and what you do in respect of keeping the numbers low and keeping COVID-19 at bay. It is still here. As we say in Jamaica, COVID's still a keep. So people just have to be responsible all around.
And now let us segue, and you mentioned responsibility. We're going to be segueing into the conversation around media responsibility. Ladies and gentlemen, this week I'm sure you were privy to two media events. Grenadian media made the news this week. The first was the Beyond the Headlines episode hosted by Odette Campbell. And on that episode, Senator Chester Humphrey called, and he really expressed anger and frustration at the network's conduct with respect to what was streamed on their social media platform. To me, one of the most interesting parts of that conversation was that he felt that the regulators in Grenada should essentially sanction the GBN for streaming that content on their social media page. So, Raul, I want to begin with you. In the absence of a media policy in Grenada, how can we ensure that we hold ourselves accountable, as Senator Humphrey was intimating in that conversation on Beyond the Headlines, and then he went on another network and really said he's not going to leave it there. He wants to sanction the GBN for irresponsible conduct. Raul?
Right. Well, I know what happens in some media houses is that they have style guides and they have certain internal manuals that run the operation. That has happened. I do not know any media house in Grenada, I'm subject to correction, who has an internal manual, an internal style guide that direct the operation. Barring we don't have a media policy. So flat out, I do not know we have any regulator or regulation, and so on. So we way past that. Chester Humphrey, the problem here is Chester Humphrey was saying some good things, was making a good point. Because back in the day, what we had was we had a system that will delay, a delay system. So people calling, anything that goes on air, there's a few seconds delay. So bad words, expletives, and so on, it does not go on air, so you can control it. But I don't know any media house now who has a delay system.
Yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong again. No. To Chester Humphrey's point, some of what he says is valid because we all can't, as responsible people, allow any and anything to go on the air. We can't. It's wrong. You can't have bad words and all these things going out on the air. You must have some measure of control. Now the problem is the messenger. The problem is not the messenger. The problem is the messenger. Chester Humphrey has a credibility issue that he alone is responsible for. He's my good partner, you know. Comrade leader, I call him. I have respect for him. He has championed a lot of cause in the labor movement. But he made a cross to the political side, and that may have worked before, but it don't always seem to work in this new dispensation. So therein lies Humphrey's credibility problem. So he cannot speak to the labor movement with any level of credibility. Not that he has not done and championed good causes, but because a lot of the causes he may have championed have been undermined by that transition into the political parameters now. So that is his problem now. Humphrey wants a new cause to champion, and so he's making this point. I'm not saying it's not a valid point because we can't support these things, but that's the problem we're having. Regarding the answer still lies, Skillon, with a media policy. And here is where, without hogging the mic too much, I say the NNP has failed us regarding that. I say the NDC has failed us regarding the media policy. And let me quickly illustrate what I mean. We started it years ago because the media policy had a complaints commission in it. They had different subcommittees to deal with quality assurance, standard, appeal commission, all these things, checks and balances to make sure quality and so on. We did a lot of work starting under the previous NNP, under Father Peter Clark era. We come up now. NNP went out in 2008, NDC came in. Tillman Thomas continued the work. We did some work. When it's now time for it to go to the legal department, it was stuck there. Tillman Thomas dropped the ball. Sorry. When NNP came back into power in 2013, Prime Minister Mitchell's argument was that he doesn't want to touch it. That should be for the Media Association. But the government, you have to touch it. You have to sit and discuss, right? So,
it has to be tabled before the parliament, yes.
Sorry. Yes, you have to be part of it. So it's stuck in the mud. It went nowhere. It had good potential for quality and standard in Grenada's media. So now, with the comments made by Steele,
yes,
you see, and the comments made by Humphrey and all these comments, it doesn't give validity to their comments. Because they are a part of a system that failed the media.
Okay. And Beverly, let's get your thoughts. I see you smiling here.
Yes, I do smile because Senator Humphrey has a serious credibility problem that he needs to deal with. And that is not to say the points he made are all invalid, but there are times when the messenger obscures the message. So if you send, I don't have to elaborate on that. That's understood. So Raul mentioned the media policy that went over many years. Raul was certainly involved in it. I was involved in it. The late George Grant was involved in it. We all tried to get the media policy in place, and all our efforts fizzled out in the end. Talk about editorial standards in media houses. Well, when Channel 6 was still the community channel and I was there, I created an editorial policy for the channel with, of course, the support and the blessings of the owners and the board of the company. We did, and we made a big thing when we launched it because we became the only media house in Grenada that had an editorial policy and put in black and white standards at which everyone involved in the media had to operate. And we should not allow, whether it's on our main channel or social media pages, but any form of broadcast attached to the name of a media house has to maintain certain standards. We cannot hide behind a cloak and say, well, it was our social media, or it was our radio, or it was this, or it was that. We have to take responsibility for it and ensure that it does not happen in the first place, because the people going out to represent that station ought to go out, Kellon, with a set of rules and regulations and know the parameters within which they operate. So someone is out there on a live broadcast. If things are happening that they know based on the training and the written policy of that media house, they know that that is not fit for broadcast, then certainly they ought to do something about it right there on the ground. But if there is not that type of training and guidance of people that work within the media house, then you will see failings like what happened on Juve morning, in inverted commas. You will see those kind of failings happening. Media houses have covered Juve all the time for years, every morning. And you always have to be selective of what goes in the live broadcast, because there are things there which are not fit for airplay. In Jamaica, the Broadcast Commission is very strict on that. And such things there would be sanctions or some kind of penalty for that kind of thing happening if there was a Broadcast Commission which managed these things. But the media in Grenada is just left to operate on its own. And so I can say it without any water in my mouth, because I spent years in the media in Grenada. The owners of the media in Grenada do not seem to understand how important, or to understand the impact or the role that the media is supposed to play in the social fabric of the country. It's not supposed to be just a money-making tool for some people. It's not supposed to be just a pass-through for people looking jobs. It has to have standards. And it pains me when I see the media operating as if it's just a little thing out there which has no relevance and no importance. It's just a thing. Journalism is serious business. And if it is not seen as serious business, then you will have people like the minister speaking to journalists in the way they do, because there is a disrespect for the fraternity, because it does not step up and cement its place and take control of that media space. Now, if media houses do not take control of the media space, even in the absence of a media policy, then nature abhors a vacuum. And if there's a vacuum, somebody is going to step in and fill that vacuum. And the type of control and the type of pressures that are being put on media houses are simply a failing of the media houses themselves to assert their role and to demonstrate what the media is supposed to do and to represent as part of the greater society.
Yeah.
And it's,
And you raise a very valid point. I would reference my late mentor, two of my late mentors, journalistic mentors, George Grant and Leslie Pear. I tell people I went to the University of Leslie Pear. That was my first university. And the reason I say that is because Leslie Pear emphasized quality control and standards. There was nothing published on the Grenadian Voice newspaper that was laced with grammatical errors, that was factually inaccurate, that was not balanced, that was thinly sourced, right? It's the same with George Grant. George Grant was very adamant that with his radio station that there was not going to be any kind of smut or any kind of vulgarity, right, on his station. And so I just feel as if standards have gone out the window. And in the absence of a policy to guide that, then that is a difficulty. But what do you guys think about Minister Steele's comments? Now, he essentially blamed the media, some aspects of the media, for really being promoting lawlessness in the Grenadian society, and which goes to the point of, again, standards as well. But can you speak to just the way that Minister Steele treated with the reporter at the press conference? Joel, I will begin with you.
Right. So Minister Steele has signed on. He is part of the policymakers of Grenada, the lawmakers of Grenada, and things happen within a certain context, within a certain legal context, policy procedures, right? So this is why even before, I like to back it up to how we have gotten to this point. We have gotten to this point where, because I'm not even bothering responding to the minister per se. He will say what he wants to say, whether it's next week, next month, or next year. That's not irrelevant. That's not relevant. What I want to do is to contextualize his comments. And he has signed on to a system that has failed Grenada and Grenada's media. And this is why I say NDC and NNP has failed Grenada's media. They engage us. We came forward, everybody, Beverly, George Grant, everybody step up. We participate in the discussion. We look at the problems. We look at the challenges. And then we say, this is where we're going to go. And they both dropped the ball. So I'm not taking his comments. He can say whatever he wants from now till whenever. But what I'm saying is I have to put it in the context of that. This is why you have to introduce a media policy so that you can keep the standard and quality and all this sort of thing. This is the reason why we were talking about it. This is the reason why we're pushing it. Now, the society changed post 1983. We had a revolution. Now we had an invasion, and our society opened up to all sorts of influences, influencing a new generation of people, influencing the way they eat, the way they behave, the way they dress, the way they think, the way they rationalize things, and so on. And that is in a way a kind of an education. You can call it indoctrination, you can call it education. Now you need to change the parameters where media is concerned. Leslie Pear, George Grant, Leslie Hosmer Sion, Alistair Hughes, they made their mark in their era. But we're in a different era now, where even at their best and advocating their best is a big challenge for what exists now. right? So it means you have to change. You have to change. You have to change the policy, the structure in which the media operates for standard. Right about now, you could have anybody. What has happened? Politicians say, okay, you supporting me? You need a license to operate a radio station? Open your radio station. That's it. That's the regulation that exists. And what happens? Standard falls. Because anybody can now go on the air, play 2 records, say what they want. That's the media. And that's what our young people are growing up into. That's what the generation, the new generation, they're growing up to that. And that's part of the miseducation that's happening in our society. So state, political governance need to take this seriously. There's a media association now. They need to throw it to the powers that be, the prevailing powers that be now, and say, listen, we have to fix this. And this is
how robust is the media association in Grenada to do that? Do you think that they have that will to really get that going? Or again, I don't want to be the one that is criticizing organizations or processes in Grenada at the expense of being viewed as someone in the diaspora. But Raul or Beverly, what are your thoughts?
Let me just backtrack a little bit on the question that you went to before about the way the minister spoke with the journalist. Now, in my opinion, Minister Steele has displayed arrogance almost every time he sits in a press conference. So his response is par for the course. It's on brand with the way he behaves. That's just how he behaves. And outside of regulations for the media, which I saw Margaret comment there that government involvement is something to be not to welcome in a media policy. But Margaret, this media policy was not being prepared by the government, but we need the parliament to enact it, to make it law. So they were not involved in formulating it as such. There were several meetings, and Raul can attest to that too. We didn't have government people involved in those meetings, involved in deciding what should be there. But it has to go through the parliament if it is to be enacted and to become law. There's just no way around that. That's the way the Constitution works, and that's how lawmaking works. So in the absence of these types of regulations, Kellon, we don't even have a broadcasting commission or anything that even smells like a broadcasting commission in Grenada. So media houses are left to independently decide on how they will operate and the standards that they will set, whether consciously or subconsciously, whether actively or passively. They are setting these standards for the people to operate, those who go out to represent and to do the news and whatever programs are done. So the media in Grenada today, Kellon, is really stuck in a very, very precarious situation. Are there people within the media who are passionate enough to take up the fight to ensure that the media asserts itself, as I said before, the way it should? Do we have that level of, do we have that kind of, what you call that backbone, that fortitude to really take up this challenge and to fight for the media as a whole, per se? I don't know if we do. I really don't know if we do. But that is needed if the media is to begin to really, really get the respect that it does, which is the second part of my response to the minister's behavior. It's a general disrespect for the media, which causes him to think that it's okay to speak with someone in the fraternity in that manner, because the media is seen as something you step over and push over and you use whenever you're so inclined. You call on the media because you need the media to do something for you.
As a function of public relations, essentially.
Exactly.
That's what they see us as utilitarians.
So.
Yes.
Exactly. And because of this, because of how the media is seen in Grenada, that feeds into the way the minister sought to speak to that journalist. And I quite think he owes her an apology. I do believe he owes her an apology because that kind of response was totally unnecessary. Unnecessary. But it's the general way that the media is perceived. I remember, Kellan, at one point, a friend of mine invited me to an event, and when I went there, I saw things there that I was not comfortable with. And I said, "Why did you invite me here? I work in the media. I can't be a part of these kind of activities." And the response from my friend was, "Media people can do anything," or something along that line. And I was surprised. I said, "No, as a media person, there you have to carry yourself and operate within a certain way because you have a certain responsibility." And the second part of the response was, "Well, media people attend this thing all the time." And I'm not, "No, well, not this media person." I left. I was not comfortable. So I mentioned that because the media, the people who work in the media, you have to know your place and don't let anybody put you in your place. Because when you know your place, then you can take control of whatever you do. But again, Kellan, a big problem is if you work in the media in Grenada currently and you decide to stand up for something, chances are you will not have the backing of your organization to go forward with something on a principle or on a right. Because if the politicians or the business people push back against the media house, guess who they're going to back and who they're going to support? The journalist is left out there on their own. And they are not able to fight these battles on their own. You'd need the fraternity. You would need your media house. You'd need your supervisors and your managers and everyone to stand in your corner with you. Does the media operate like that in Grenada? I dare say it doesn't. So the young, untrained reporters, they just come in, fall into a kind of system, and what we get is what we get. And the kind of disrespect meted out to the media, it's meted out to the media because of the kind of situation that the media has found itself in. And it's gonna take some doing to get out of it. But who's gonna bend
And
the
let's Lincoln is making an interesting point. He's saying the discussion is narrowly focused on TV and government, but the problem is bigger and wider when you include newspapers and the numerous radio stations and media relations vis-a-vis the private sector.
No, well, when I say media, it encompasses all of those. Because the radio stations today, oh gosh, Kellan, I don't want to talk about the radio stations.
Well, I mean, Raul intimated to that earlier as well. But
Yeah.
yes, Raul, yes.
You see, this is why, just quickly, I was watching, and I'm sure some of you also saw it too, the Barbados Prime Minister, Mia Mott, being interviewed by that BBC reporter.
Right.
And she was asking the question, they always like to ask this question about Caribbean's involvement in China, that sort of thing. And her response was basically reprimanding the reporter. That's the Barbados Prime Minister. She did that in a very, not with arrogance, as smooth as ever. She basically effectively reprimanded the reporter. But although it's not my favorite reporter on BBC, how she handled it, she just basically she just laughed it out, laughed at it and disarmed the Barbados Prime Minister. I thought it was a nice interplay. I say this, but pointing to the steel comments, what has happened, and to speak to the bigger issue here, is that respect has been lost for the media in Grenada.
Right.
There is no respect. And I passionately focus on how we got to where we are now. And I keep saying the reason we got from where we are now is because we did not handle things at the level of policy.
But Raul, I'm sorry. I would push back there. Would you not bear some responsibility for that? You were a leader, and I think you still viewed
Right.
as a leader in the media fraternity. You served as the
Right.
president of the Media Workers Association of Grenada, and some might say that you have credibility issues as well.
Well, that's okay. Now, to answer your question directly,
Yes.
and I know you also know the answer to the question because I think even Beverly mentioned it to you. I don't think you were in Grenada. We campaign heavily. We campaign heavily, right, to get this media policy in place. We were at the doorsteps of it. It got to the legal department. This is why I keep saying the ball was dropped by both the NNP administration and both the NNDC. What they needed to do was simply take it from the legal department and bring it and pass it in the House, as Beverly was saying earlier on. We can't do that unless Toby wants to make a media person a senator. we can't deal with it at the level of Parliament. It's the parliamentarians that have to implement this. We've done our work. So if you want to talk about the work that I did, we did our work. We did. But so the problem is, so while we're here now, so now, and then the other thing is the politics undermine it too, because what has happened is that, Kellan, you support me. You want to open a radio station? You open a radio station. So Kellan opened his own radio station, and Kellan didn't have enough money to properly fund it and so on. He just have enough money to get on the air. He paid license fee for this year, but he can't pay license fee for next year and the year after. So he's at the whims of the politician now. And he jamming and he bring on Tom and Jerry on the air and all of that hustle. So if it was $5 million, 2-3 media house competing for, 15 and 20 media house competing for $5 million, that has diluted. That's the point I'm making. The profession has been diluted by political governance. The media profession has been diluted. And because it has been diluted, and this is why I'm so half-hearted. I don't want to 100% blame media practitioners, although some media practitioners have done well. Despite the circumstances, they go and get training, get education, fine, I'll applaud that. But in terms of the structure of the media, we didn't take care of the structure of the level of policy and governance and law, right? So now we're in a situation where we have 1 million radio stations, everybody competing, and it's just a quality issue. We didn't take care of the quality issue through the media policy and the different committees. It's a quality issue. So right now, we could be spinning top in mud. We have all these little problems which we should not be having. I'm glad Beverly mentioned, because when I was speaking about no media house have a style guide or editorial guide, I was kind of happy because I know someone had done it, but I wasn't too sure who. But I'm glad Beverly mentioned it was their media outfit that did it, which is good. So you see, despite the odds, they went ahead and they have a style guide. Some did it, so they did it, but most of them didn't do it. In the absence of a policy, they didn't put a policy, a guideline in place to how they handle news, how they deal with news and the sourcing and the this and the that and so on. The policy for broadcast, what is allowed to go on, what is not. So it's a lawless media.
And on that note, folks, we really have to get to the next segment. Mr. Jeffrey Pradum, son of Herbert Pradum, thank you for being so patient, sir. You've been waiting in the wind. Yes. Yes, thank you so much. We will be getting to you shortly. But Raul and Beverly, let's get some closing comments from you.
Okay, ladies first.
Yes.
Okay. Well, I would encourage those in Grenada who are really interested in journalism to upgrade themselves, Kellan. Journalism is not a joke. You need to get some training, and so that you can hone your skills as a journalist. Right now, there is not that value on journalists in Grenada. And when I hear someone reporting and calling themselves a trainee reporter, the first thing that comes to my mind is, who is doing the training of this young person who says they're a trainee? Training is necessary, and they need to be trained in the right way, not just in the tools and how to operate the tools of the profession, but in language, interpersonal skills. You need to be trained in law. There are several areas that have to be covered. And I would implore the media managers and owners to also invest in the product. Don't just be out there as a little whimsy-whamsy, flamsy-flimsy kind of thing. You have an important role to play. All that is going out and all that the media is being blamed for should not be, because in essence, the media just parrots everything that happens within the chambers of authority, regardless of who that authority is. The media does not challenge it, they just report it. So if the media talks about things that are happening here and there, it's because it's happening. It's not anything that they would have created for themselves. So that kind of blame, I think, is also unfair when the media is just reporting on what is happening and just repeating what is said in all the various areas of power and authority. So I would appeal to the owners and managers of media houses to invest in your product, to pay some attention to what media really is supposed to do. To those disc jocks and others who go on air, educate yourselves before you start saying things into your microphone. It is appalling. Sometimes you cringe when you hear some of the things that these disc jocks say. No research, nothing. So please educate yourselves before you go on air. Put some quality into what is delivered from the media. And maybe, just maybe, we could begin agitating again to get that media policy. Probably more than likely needs reviewing at this time, but have it reviewed and agitate for it to become law, because the media itself need to be held to certain standards. It cannot be allowed to just run away like a wild horse. It has to be reined in. So that would be my appeal, Kellon, because we really need to see some change for the better in media in Grenada and certainly across the Caribbean.
Raul?
Right, thank you. Just not to keep it any longer, just to say I support all what Beverly is saying, and especially that policy now, Media Association also lobby heavily with the government, whoever government is there, to bring in that policy properly implemented so that it could try and solve the problem as much as we can. And just to speak to my record as well, Kellon, just to clear the air, you might not know this, because we were campaigning heavily for a lot of good things. We got, and Michael Bascom could hear me out, the TAMCC to introduce an associate degree in media studies. From media workers in Grenada were attending this. They got, a lot of them were qualified through that program. I don't know the state of it now, but that is an accomplishment on my CV as well. Huh? So just letting you know that, and for those who want to challenge my credibility. But I support all what Beverly is saying, and I hope things can move to a better state, where we can have a policy in place, we can interact with whoever administration is in power, and really, because salaries is one thing. People, somebody making a point that
I think salaries, no role. Salaries is a major issue as far as I'm concerned.
That's a whole program.
Well, it is a whole program, but then I think media managers, they don't invest in these media workers. I was fortunate enough to, again, as I said, I would go back and talk about my experience with Leslie Pear, with George Grant, Paula Lewis at the time, who also worked at The Voice. That was investment. They didn't.
Salaries went down. Went down when the media became diluted. Salary went down. And a number of positions were removed. So you no longer have a program director. I think Flow changed from a program director to a program coordinator. GBN changed from a program. They don't even have a news director. I think they have a news coordinator now. So positions
there is no news director.
were diluted and removed. I'll leave it there.
All right. Okay. This has been a very important. We really have to get to the next segment. This has been very important discussion. Viewers, just let me advise you, unfortunately, we were unable to connect with attorney Anselm Clouden. We were having some logging issues with him, but we will definitely work diligently to have him here next week, at which time we will attempt to have a fully constituted legal panel. So Beverly and Raul, thank you, colleagues, for appearing on the Bubb Report today.
You are most welcome. Thanks for the invitation, Kellon.
Absolutely.
Congratulations, Kellon. Congrats.
Thank you, Raul. Thank you so much. Yes, and let us get to Mr. Prudham. Mr. Prudham, I'll be getting to you shortly. I see that the heat is getting to you there. Let's take a break. We will go back in history a little bit. with a clip of Sir Eric Gairy that was back in the 1984 election, a footage provided by the Associated Press, and then we will reflect on the passing of Grenada's father of independence, trade unionist, politician extraordinaire, Sir Eric Matthew Gairy. I will play that clip and we will be right back.
The party that is capable of restoring peace and stability to Grenada.
Tina Turner, what's love got to do with it?
Vote the Grenada United Labour Party.
We pray for tomorrow, our general elections.
Working on the last few moments. Long live the friendship with Cuba! Long live the friendship with Cuba! Long live the friendship with Cuba! National Airport. Viva Cuba! NMP all the way, I say. NMP all the way. NMP all the way, I say. NMP all the way. NMP. We are asking one and all to forget.
Grenada needs a period of healing right now. Grenada has been badly battered.
And that was some footage from the 1984 elections, historic footage from the Associated Press. I love going into the archives, and really, as a researcher, I really dig into the archives to find historical footage on Grenada. But at this time, I want to welcome Mr. Jeffrey Pridham. Mr. Jeffrey Pridham of the Grenada United Labour Party. Now, Mr. Pridham, first of all, welcome to the Bubb Report.
Thank you.
Yes, I just as background, I did reach out to Sir Eric Gairy's daughters, Marcel and Jennifer, who recommended one Mr. Dolland, who sat in the cabinet of Sir Eric Matthew Gairy in the 70s, but then they recommended you, Mr. Pridham, to appear to reflect on Sir Eric Gairy's legacy. But I want to begin, Mr. Pridham, by sharing an editorial at the time of Sir Eric Gairy's passing in 1997, I believe it was. Yes, 1997, August 23rd, which is tomorrow. It's going to be 24 years since his death. But I want to share this article here from the Independent newspaper. They were not necessarily kind to Grenada's father of independence, but I want you to react to that article. Let me pull that up right now. It's an obituary on Sir Eric Gairy. And this is what was said. Sir Eric Gairy, a Prime Minister of Grenada 1974 to 1979, died at his home at Grandance on the south coast of the island. He loved and tyrannized. The wall-eyed Don Juan in the white suit, Gairy was one of the last of a generation of West Indian labor leaders who challenged the colonial plantocracy on behalf of their union members and eventually took political independence for their islands from the hands of successive British governments, Labour and Conservative, who were all too eager to get shot of the Caribbean encumbrances of empire. The Antilles had long since lost that economic importance that the monopoly of sugar production gave them in the 18th century, when Britain would bleed France to death for such patches of land as Grenada, St. Lucia, and or Dominica. Gairy was also one of the worst of that generation, a rotten apple in a barrel which included large and often great figures as Alexander Bustamante and the Manleys in Jamaica, the Adams in Barbados, Eric Williams in Trinidad and Tobago, Robert Bradshaw in St. Kitts, and Ebenezer Joshua in St. Vincent. And I will close here quickly. Gairy was born to a peasant family in 1922 in St. Andrew's Parish and was educated at the Catholic Parish School in a strongly Catholic island. Early in his working life, he immigrated to the Standard Oil Refinery on the industrialized Dutch island of Aruba in search of the betterment his own country could not offer him. He returned with a vengeance, and in the 1950s set out to master and ridicule the conventions of the colonial establishment based in the capital, St. George's, in order to teach his growing number of followers self-respect. I'm going to stop here, but I thought that was a very interesting editorial on the founder of the Grenada United Labour Party. So I hand it over to you to reflect on Sir Eric Gairy.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me on and for representing the family and the Grenada United Labour Party today. I would say that obituary was not balanced or fair, because when you look at the role of Sir Eric in 1950 and addressing the needs of the agricultural workers primarily, where people were working for the same wages in 1850 that they got in 1950. And that was the beginning of the realization of the socio-economic revolution in Grenada. And Sir Eric is really one of the major social revolutionaries in the Caribbean. Those are facts. Mm-hmm. And with the organizing of the agricultural workers and the nationwide strike that came about, what did we get? We got the increase in wages. We got back wages. We got sick pay and holiday. We got the 8-hour workday, and really it was the beginning of the socioeconomic revolution in Grenada, where people had additional means of economic resources to start building their families out.
Mm-hmm.
So
yes, Mr. Pradam. So I think Grenada has done a really good job of honoring that legacy, honoring what Sir Eric Gairy has done. But let us fast forward to 2021. We are in this current political climate in Grenada, and you are attempting to reconstitute the Grenada United Labour Party. I remember famously when Sir Eric Gairy died, I was a child. I was just coming out of high school, teenager, and I remember the conversation was that the Grenada United Labour Party is buried in the Centre Cemetery. Now, are you attempting to resurrect the legacy of Sir Eric Gairy with the GULP? Or what would the new GULP look like, given that there's been significant demographic shift in Grenada?
Well, first of all, I would say let's talk about the demographics first. When we did the analysis, 40% of the GULP base went to NP, and 15% of the GULP base went to NDC. So, first of all, in trying to rebuild the Grenada United Labour Party based on labor principles, we are trying to rebuild a modern labor party. And we have had challenges from the death of Sir Eric to now in trying to identify strong leadership that has the ability, the experience, and the capabilities to bring to the fore to actually bring about the rebirth and renewal of the Grenada United Labour Party. So what we are trying to do and how we are doing this is that, because everybody says it's been impossible because of all the fighting over that period and the ability of the organization to maintain its momentum and the difficulty over the various cycles. So what we have decided to do was to look back to the last convention, which was March of 2010, gather all the existing elected members from that period, bring them to the fore in order to bring the organization back together. But what we have done additionally was that we created a strategic operational plan which is phased in various cycles, in various phases in order to bring the party back. So in phase one, what did we do? We looked and see how we can create a logo that told the history of the Grenada United Labour Party and of Grenada, because the history of Grenada and the history of the Grenada United Labour Party are inseparable, from 1951 to the actual coup. And I would still maintain that it's a coup because Brother Bishop was the leader of the opposition, so he overthrew his own government, right? So those are facts. And so what we have done in creating the logo is that we came up with 3 strategic pillars, one of independence, one of justice, and one of development. And to use that as a prism for leadership development, for decision-making, and policy-making. Once we have done that, we looked at a period where people complained of the excesses of Sir Eric. So we included a vision statement, a mission statement, but more importantly, we added 9 universal values to the party. And we are challenging our other parties, the NNP and the NDC and others, to hold the Grenada United Labour Party, the renewed Grenada United Labour Party, to those universal values, right?
But you say,
and if the individual takes on those,
Mr. Pridham, you say we. When were you appointed as the political leader of the Grenada United Labour Party? When was that convention held to make you the leader? Did you self-appoint yourself as a leader?
No, I didn't self-appoint myself. So if you follow the logic in what I'm saying, when I came back here and buried my parents back in 2020, after giving the eulogy, I met with a lot of party leaders and other people who independently encouraged me to come back, which I agreed to, and I gave my word. And from that point on, I tried to connect with members of the last convention, the last elected leadership. And with gathering all those people and working together, once we came up with a plan, as we started into the plan and we came about with the logo, etc., it came a point where somebody had to lead the effort. And out of the existing group within our executive members, it was agreed to appoint me as interim leader to lead the effort in rebuilding the Grenada United Labour Party.
Okay, so you would say right. So you are sort of a transitional leader in the process. So what's going to happen? Are you going to be having a fully constituted convention? Yes. Go ahead. Sorry.
So you have to understand where the party was. When we started the party. What existed was the party in name. There was no physical structures, no resources, no infrastructure, just the existing executive that was not properly functioning. The mere fact we gathered everybody together and had a plan. You can't get from nowhere to somewhere, meaning no infrastructure, no machinery of the party, and have a convention. The convention is the end result, but you must build back the recruitment. First of all, we don't even know the base of the party. We know where our base went, right? And a portion of our base does not participate, especially retirees and so, in the electoral process. Now that the party is back and we begin to recruit and identify the political base where we heavy recruitment with individual, connecting individuals to small groups throughout Grenada, Carriacou, and Petit Martinique. The end result when we get there is to have a general council meeting, which would lead to a convention. And in that interim, as we fill out the constitution of the party, because it's just a constitution in name, and we're functioning in the spirit of it until we build back the infrastructure. It's a process. And building back is hard and it takes time, but building back with people is even harder and it takes longer. And that's where we have been. We have been systematic. The party is building its momentum. Additionally, what we did that the party didn't have before was to create a research, development, and intelligence arm of the party, the RDI of the GLP, because we wanted to be objective, fact-based, and be able to prepare. So a lot of the clips, you'll see a lot of activity from the GLP, but it's based on research. And all those clips represent policy development that would collapse into our manifesto. And currently what we do have present as we go out and starting as I did yesterday in St. John's, would meet the people tours throughout Grenada, Carriacou, and Petit Martinique, is to give a handout, which is in the form of a trifold, to tell people what the party is about currently, what we aspire to do. So the GLP, when you hear about the renewed Grenada United Labour Party, you would hear about what we plan to do. We're not telling you what we're against because others are doing that for us. We're telling you what we're for. And politics is about the future. People want to know how you're going to impact their lives and the future of their families. And the Grenada United Labour Party is a grassroots party. It came from the ground. It first was a labor movement, the first labor movement in the history of Grenada, which gave birth to the first political party, the People's Party, and which was converted into the Grenada United Labour Party. So there you have it. And so you can't have one without the other. It's a process. So as you build back the party, the end goal is a convention. In the interim, we have a strong executive that we work collaboratively together, and we are building back phase by phase. And that's where we are today.
Would you be ready and prepared for the next constitutionally due elections in Grenada?
That is our hope. Where we are currently, it all depends, because we are ready to launch our campaign. We have at least 5 solid candidates. We need 15. And so we already start working in that endeavor. We have an immediate plan, short-term, medium, and long-term. But the Grenada United Labour Party is here to stay and to be part of the conversation in terms of Grenada's national development, because it's the only truly revolutionary party, the only true workers' party in Grenada, the party that is concerned about the welfare of the average person in Grenada. And that is what the Grenada United Labour Party is all about, impacting the lives of individuals, how we can help them, meet them at their point of need, where we can help them develop the families, develop the communities, and in the end, develop the national development of Grenada. And we are building an economic plan and trying to look at all the sectors so we can build them out to create a pipeline for skill sets and give a wider complement of opportunities to all Grenadians. So we want to tie our economic development plan directly to national development.
Yeah. Now, Mr. Pridham, 2 final questions. The first one is, Mr. Michael Batiste was realistically one of the last elected members of the Grenada Parliament on a GULP ticket, along with Mr. Clarence Rapier in 1995, and they served in sort of a coalition arrangement with the New National Party administration at the time. But now we find that Mr. Michael Batiste, a substantive representative of the GULP, seem to have difficulties with your involvement with the Grenada United Labour Party. It's felt as if there is still some a brewing conflict between, shall we say, the Batiste faction and now, I guess, the new faction, if you will. How are you going to be working to mend those tensions that currently exist?
So I think that presentation is inaccurate. Currently, Mr. Michael Batiste is not a member of the Grenada United Labour Party. I'll give you a quick profile, fact pattern. He was elected in 1995 under the GULP. He crossed over in some sort of arrangement over with the NP. He ran in 1999 on the NNP ticket.
NNP ticket, yes.
Right? And he was a member of that. According to the constitution of the Grenada United Labour Party, you could only you could only be a member of one party at a time. Then he got into some difficulty with NNP and he collapsed within their fold. And in 2003, he ran again under the GLP and he lost 2/3 of the constituency that voted for him before. Since 2003, he has not been a candidate in any form, shape, or fashion. Then in 2013, let's fast forward, our last convention, the people that we are working with, so there is the GLP executive and there is Michael Batiste. Under the current executive, there was no arrangement or amalgamation with NDC. Mr. Michael Batiste was on the NDC platform in 2013 and 2018. He can only be a member of one party at a time under the Grenada United Labour Party constitution. And by definition and by fact, he's not a member. He's free to reapply to be a member of the Grenada United Labour Party, but he's not currently a member of the Grenada United Labour Party. Those are facts. So there's no dispute and no faction. He cannot say at one time he called me and asked me to help him rebuild the Grenada United Labour Party, and then at the other time he said I've been away for 42 years and I am not a local. Then that's a bipolar argument. Why are you contacting me? Right? When I left Grenada, I left on political asylum and went to the United States. I've been in the military for 30 years. From there, I was recruited and worked with the Veteran Affairs and been the president of a local union. When I decided to give all that up and return to Grenada to help rebuild the Grenada United Labour Party as a noble effort to make sure that the Grenada United Labour Party is always part of the political dispensation that impacts the development of Grenada and the interests of the working class in Grenada. And that is where we are today. He is free to rejoin the Grenada United Labour Party if he so desires, but all the claims and the noise that he has made is not based in fact. It's based in his own opinion. And you can ask him who else is behind him. I can present our current executive who is behind the efforts that we are doing. It's not what I am doing. We are doing that collectively as the executive body of the Grenada United Labour Party.
Okay, all right, Mr. Pradam, that's fair. It will be interesting to see how this unfolds. So my final question to you is, how is the GULP going to be honoring the late Sir Eric Gairy at this anniversary of his passing? I know that at least in Grenada, when I lived in Grenada, we covered there was some wreath laying ceremonies by some diehard supporters and things like that. What would that look like this year?
So because of the change, we had various plans, and because of the change in the protocol, as you mentioned in the earlier portion, with the spread, with the limitation of 20 people and the difference in the curfew. So what we have done this weekend in recognizing Sir Eric's death and the 24 years is that most of the churches today, we have mass in various parishes celebrating his life and his contribution to the development of Grenada. We are also, as a party, celebrating 70 years this year from 1951 to 2021 of the founding of the Grenada United Labour Party. And so you will hear more on as to how we abbreviate and adapt what we have to do, because we, the Grenada United Labour Party, who is pro-vaccine, but know that everybody has pure choice, we want to follow all the protocols and adapt accordingly and encourage all Grenadians to do the same.
Okay. All right, Mr. Pradam, thank you for agreeing to appear on the program. It would have been nice to have the Gairy daughters here, but I
Yes.
understand that they have some other obligations that might have precluded them from being on the program. So
Yes.
thank you again for appearing on the report.
And I was happy to represent the family, represented Grenada United Labour Party, and all the hard-working families in Grenada, that the Grenada United Labour Party is their champion and advocate going forward in the past and in the future. So look forward to hearing great things from us, and we're working hard every day to build out this strategic operational plan in the renewal of the Grenada United Labour Party, where we plan to provide opportunities for everybody and social justice for all.
Yeah, and before we go, we have a question here from Cassandra Mitchell. She's saying the GULP circulated a letter challenging the TGM's use of the color red. Can you ask Mr. Pradam about that?
Yes,
Is that an issue that you a difficulty you have with the TGM's logo?
Yes, we do have that, and we submitted our paperwork to the electoral office as to me being identified, signed by our party general secretary. Our color is red, always has been. Red is associated with the labor movement and with the Grenada United Labour Party for the last 70 years. And for the newest political party to come on the scene and be disrespectful to the oldest political party, we first started by doing a release and calling attention to them before we take further action, asking them to cease and desist and to reconsider how they approach their branding, that they should have to have their own color and be authentic in their own way and tell the Grenadian people who they are and what they truly represent, as opposed to we having to tell people that we are not associated with that group if you see them in red, because there is not a difference in seeing the color and stuff. So we are asking the TGM not to cause further confusion with the Grenada electorate and to kind of go back to the drawing board, figure out who they are, and represent themselves to the Grenadian people.
Okay, we'll be watching that space to see how that unfolds. Saren Mark is saying, listening to Mr. Pradam, I fear for the political parties in Grenada in terms of transitional leadership. I hope these parties are taking notes so that they do not end up like the GULP.
Go ahead. What I want to promise was is one of the things that I wanted to present to the Grenada United Labour Party because of my education, my experience. I've been in the military for 30 years. I lived all over the world, dealt with a lot of civil affairs, etc. I am presenting myself through the Grenada United Labour Party and given my service now that I am finished with my work outside of Grenada and trying to devote my life to Grenada and helping in rebuilding the Grenada United Labour Party. It's a genuine effort. It's a sincere effort. And we will be successful because we have a plan and we are systematic and we are phased. So look for good things from us. Give us your support.
Well, yes,
help clarify it.
Mr. We have the parliamentary a representative from the Parliamentary Elections Office. I believe he's a supervisor. One of my old teachers from Pomereux School, Elvis Moraney, saying the Parliamentary Elections Office has no jurisdiction for assigning colors. So again, as I said, we'll be watching the space. Let us see how this is going to unfold. Okay? And Beverly, go ahead.
But the main thing about that is about following throughout the democratic world, following norms and procedures. A new entity like an NGO come in to be into the political space. They should have known how to navigate the political space. They won't take green. NNP has that. They won't take yellow. NDC has it. GLP has red. They should have looked at that. Those are political norms in any democratic society.
I think yes. I think norms and laws; those are two different things. I think you're splitting hairs here, right?
No, I'm not
again,
splitting.
as I said,
I'm just saying as a new entity, the newest to the oldest, we're just telling them go back and relook at things because these are normal democratic practices.
Okay, all right, Mr. Pradam, let's see how that's going to unfold. Thank you again for appearing on the report. We really appreciate you for being so patient with us today and for sticking around as we remember the Grenada's father of independence on the anniversary of his passing. That was Mr. Jeffrey Pradam of the Grenada United Labour Party. And before we go, I have some fun facts to share about you. 1997 was an interesting year in terms of the celebrities the world lost. And we would remember some of those people who died in 1997, in addition to Sir Eric Gairy. Some might say that he's in good company in the hereafter. We have Princess Diana, who died on the 31st of August, 1997. We had Notorious B.I.G., who also died in August of 1997. Mother Teresa died in September, but it was around that period of time. So I thought I would share that interesting tidbit. They say sometimes death happens in threes. But folks, listeners and viewers, let me thank you again for staying with us. We went over time, but I thought given the nature of our conversations today that we really needed to do that. And we thank you again for tuning in to the Bubb Report for another week. As a programming note, this program is also aired on the GBN. This week it will be at 5 p.m. on the Grenada Broadcasting Network for those who were not watching it on our Facebook and YouTube platforms. On behalf of the entire production team here at the Bubb Report, I am your host, Dr. Kellen Bubb. Thank you for tuning in and have a great, productive, and safe week in Grenada. Bye-bye.